Hi, and welcome to another edition of Shattering the Mind Matrix. Today's topic is decoding the deep state. So what is the deep state? The deep state is a secret network of tens of thousands of unelected men and women who are entrenched inside the U.S. government along with regular elected officials. Shortly after the 9/11 attack, the number of unelected officials working in Washington, D.C. with special security clearances reached as high as 855,000. That was more people than what was working in the government at that time. These unelected officials worked for the banking cartel and corporate elites and helped form laws and policies that were later introduced to the U.S. President and Congress for passing. However, the deep state does not consist of just unelected officials. Over the decades, the deep state has been successful in electing thousands of their loyal operatives into high-level positions all throughout America. They hold positions in Congress, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Intelligence Agency, and the Department of Treasury. All these agencies were coordinated by the Executive Office of the President. So yeah, even our presidents worked for the deep state. You need to know that the deep state is not loyal to the United States or its citizens. They work solely for the interests of the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, and corporate America. As I mentioned in an early video, the United States became a corporation in 1871, and the corporate elites has been running our country ever since. Don't believe me? Look it up for yourself. But yeah, the deep state influences run much deeper than the U.S., for it is a global beast with tentacles that stretches all over the world. For he who controls the money controls everything, and the deep state is reported with a network of over $900 trillion. Every election, the deep state would hand select who they wanted to be president of the United States, and they always selected people whom they can control and coerce to pass laws that benefited them and to support wars that increased their bottom lines. Hence the Iraq, Pakistan, and Libya wars George Bush Jr. and Barack Obama started during their presidency, which turned out to be a complete farce and waste of American lives and tax dollars. None of the past presidents had any real power to dictate how the United States would be ran or the laws that it would pass. Presidents who tried to override the orders of the deep state were either blackmailed, threatened, or murdered, like John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby Kennedy, and a botched murder attempt on Ronald Reagan. For decades, the deep state has controlled state policy behind the scene, while Republican and Democratic elected officials were merely figureheads for public illusion. In other words, to make the naive public believe their elected officials were actually running the country and passing policies in their best interest. But that, my friends, could not be further from the truth. In fact, nearly 80% of all laws and policy passed by Congress was introduced by the deep state. That's why so few ever benefited the American people. With President Obama bailing out the banks and automotive industries with billions of taxpayer dollars, the U.S. continued to have record-high unemployment, while millions of manufactured jobs continue to flow out of the country to Mexico, Canada, and China. So does NAFTA really sound like it was done in the best interest of the people? No, I don't think so. Anytime someone dared stand up to the deep state bankers, they were quickly silenced with a bullet, or they had their organization infiltrated by CIA spies like Jesse Jackson and Andrew Young, who were responsible for setting up the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It was stated by those closest to Martin Luther King Jr. that he knew Jesse Jackson was a spy for the CIA, but had no idea Andrew Young was a traitor too. Andrew Young was Martin's left-hand man, second only to Martin's best friend and co-pastor, Ralph Abernathy. But that's how the deep state works. They use their most talented con artists to bring down a target. And that's what Jesse Jackson and Andrew Young were, con artists. Here you can see Jesse and Andrew revisiting the Lorraine Hotel where Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. It's true that criminals always return to the scene of their crimes, and Jesse Jackson and Andrew Young are no exceptions to that rule. And the same goes for Malcolm X. It's no secret that Minister Louis Farrakhan and his gang of thugs played a major role in the death of Malcolm X with the help of the CIA, who knew of the Nation of Islam plan to murder Malcolm but did nothing to abort their plans. For the CIA wanted Malcolm silenced just as bad as the Nation of Islam, and so they allowed the hit to go off as planned. Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam were angry with Malcolm for exposing the sexual immorality of their leader, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So they set their plot in motion to murder Malcolm and were successful in doing so in 1965, thanks to the CIA failure to intervene. But like I said, that's how the deep state gets down. It's a fact that no one who opposes the deep state lives to talk about it. Nearly all who did were assassinated. So answer me this. Why are these men still alive and thriving? Because they are deep state, and every African American should shun these deep state traitors. But back to the deep state. Yes, there is absolutely a shadow government behind the visible one you see in Washington, D.C. It is a collection of national security and law enforcement agencies, along with public and private institutions that ruled our country in stealth mode. Most Americans are unaware that these people exist, although they've been operating in plain sight in our government for decades. Many hold positions such as congressmen, governors, mayors, councilmen, attorneys, judges, doctors, professors, scientists, engineers, film and music executives, actors, news anchormen, clergymen, corporate CEOs, social media techs, and so forth. This is how the deep state has kept the U.S. citizen under its control, by making you believe they don't exist. But like Satan, the deep state is definitely real, and only those at the highest levels of government know who they are. For years I've wondered why our government was so broken and dysfunctional. I also wonder why our presidents never kept their word once they got elected to office. And I also wonder why the men and women we elected into Congress never seem to get anything done. But thanks to a few brave men and women in government who stood up and blew the whistle on the corruption they saw throughout our government, I was finally able to determine who the real traitors were operating in plain sight within our government. I was also able to grasp why our country was not thriving and progressing like other countries. I discovered that there was literally thousands of deep state traitors working against the betterment of our country within our government. You need to know that anyone who attempts to deny the deep state existence is a part of the deep state. And any article that you read on the internet that states that the deep state is a conspiracy theory or fairy tale is a deep state operative attempting to mislead you. For it is much easier for the deep state to manipulate your mind if you are unaware that they exist. But moving on to another way that the deep state spies on us. Unbeknownst to us citizens, the deep state tech engineers have developed a state-of-the-art surveillance system that allows them to monitor every aspect of your life and store that data for future use. By compiling endless terabytes of data on you, they can use this information to mold you into a docile, compliant sheep that never question the poisoning of your food and atmosphere, or your unfair treatment and lack of prosperity and freedom in America. By monitoring your cell phone, TV, and internet habits, deep state techs like Facebook, Twitter, and Google can tailor programs that keep your mind occupied with useless crap that distracts you from what they're actually doing to keep you enslaved. They have also installed a surveillance system throughout the U.S. that is 30 years ahead of anything you've ever seen and are nearly undetectable to the human eye. This super surveillance system can locate an ant in the middle of Central Park, so I am puzzled as to why so many missing children are still missing today. But as I stated earlier, the deep state does not work in the best interests of the U.S. citizen. The deep state also have eye and facial recognition technology installed in the most busiest locations throughout America. And they have multiple surveillance centers where thousands of deep state operatives monitor and record your every move. This data is stored into huge servers for future use. Millions of naive citizens are unaware that their privacy is being infringed upon on a macro level by the deep state. Who are the elites controlling the deep state? Well, many of them come from wealthy backgrounds with very old money. Some have lineage that stretches back as far as 400 years and have a combined network of over $900 trillion. So you can imagine the enormous power these people wield throughout the world. Most are of Jewish, Khazarian, German, and European ancestry and have enormous amount of stock and control over the world banks. For nearly 150 years, they have controlled the U.S. monetary system with an iron fist with little opposition. That was until a famous flamboyant billionaire named Donald Trump decided to throw his hat into the ring for the President of the United States. Like all presidents before him, the deep state thought Donald Trump would be just another stool pigeon they could control and manipulate to do their bidding. But fortunately for the American people, that was far from the truth. President Trump turned out to be the polar opposite of his predecessors and have launched a war against the deep state to rid Americans of the deep state stranglehold on our economy and sovereignty. In retaliation, the deep state immediately activated their sleeper cells in mainstream media and our government to destroy President Trump and his administration. I was amazed by how many deep state operatives were in the Democratic Party that I had supported for nearly half of my life. I had no idea I had been sleeping with the enemy all those years. Democratic leaders and some Republican rhinos began showing their true colors by advocating legislation that hurt the American people, like calling for war on Syria and Russia, or advocating open borders, sanctuary cities for illegal aliens, higher taxes on the middle class, and revoking Trump's tax cuts for all Americans, just to name a few. All these anti-American policies are elements of the deep state, and millions of naive Americans are unaware of that fact. You need to know that President Trump was sought out and asked to run for president by the two remaining generals in our government that were still loyal to America. They sought Trump's help to rid our government of its corruption and to defeat far-left Democrats and Republican rhinos who sought to overthrow the U.S. government and eliminate our Constitution. It is the deep state goal to make the United States a third world country like Venezuela so that we cannot defend our sovereignty and freedom. Many brainwashed Americans are supporting their own country's downfall in hopes that there will be some crumbs left on the table for them after the smoke clears. But they are sadly mistaken if they think their lives would be better after the U.S. falls. Many of these brainwashed citizens don't even care if they or their family suffer so long as the rich and powerful suffers with them. And this sort of mindset is dangerous not only to the individuals thinking that way, but to every law-abiding citizen around them. No American is safe when brainwashed terrorists roam freely throughout America looking for another school to shoot up or a public place to bomb. A lot of this hysteria is being whipped up by Democratic congressmen who are using a groupthink method to persuade gullible citizens to adopt their sick views and to act out on it violently. These Democratic senators need to be held accountable for any citizen who is harmed by their whipped up mobs. I believe there may come a time when family and friends will find themselves on opposite sides of America based on their beliefs, and that divide may lead to a second civil war if our government officials don't take control of the volatile situation brewing in America today. I personally have no intention of harming or ostracizing my family and friends for their belief, for that's what makes this country great, the freedom of speech and the liberty to think and believe what you choose. However, as a former U.S. Marine, I will defend the United States against all foreign and domestic terrorists, be it friend or foe, if I am called upon to do so by my president. Treason is a wicked deed that no American should ever commit against his own country, and to do so would warrant nothing less than life in prison. Now don't get me wrong, I believe every American has the right to disagree with their government policies and rulings. But no one has the right to advocate violence against another human being simply because he or she disagrees with their views. That is tyranny, and it must be put down permanently. In closing, I'd just like to say that I hope the millions of rational thinking Democrats and independents recognize the violent behavior of the far left and decide not to participate in their madness by hashtag walking away. And even if you don't like President Trump, you shouldn't turn a blind eye to his many accomplishments or attempt to besmirch his outstanding performance over the past 2 years. I want to thank you for watching my video, and I encourage you to stay calm, vigilant, and safe during the U.S. election. Peace to you all.